right, it's my pleasure to introduce our speaker today, Robert Krajenke. We all know Robert. And I first met Robert back in 1982. We were in need of a minister then. In those days, we had a full-time minister, just one minister, and Paul Solomon had heard about this guy named Robert Krajenke, who was very involved with the ARE. He just published the trilogy on the Bible, and it was a very big success based on the Casey readings. And anyway, we were just so glad to have Robert as our new minister. He was the minister here for 3 years, and since that time we've just become just better friends every year. Robert's the type of guy that whenever I needed somebody to do something, Robert was always the first person I'd call, and he'd always say yes. For example, Robert was in charge of our ministry at the Judeo-Christian Outreach Center for about 5 or 6 years. When we had someone in the hospital, if I couldn't go, Robert would go. At one point, we needed to have a new drainage pipe put out here, a very inglorious task, and we had to dig a ditch. And for 3 days, Robert and myself and Jeff Jones dug this ditch back there. And Robert he was just a couple of years ago, he was just swinging away, just working as hard as he could, because that's just the type of guy Robert is, you know. Most of us know a couple of years ago, Robert started having some serious health challenges, so now he's pretty much homebound. But we have a team of about 14 people, and then every day a different one of us takes Robert out to dinner or lunch. And it's a joy. The reason it's so easy to get people is Robert's a joy to work with. We feel blessed just to be with Robert. So anyway, Robert, without further ado, before your halo gets any bigger, come on up.
Wow. This is a special moment for me because it's probably been almost a year since I stood here. Although my particular issue began in October when I was walking my dog and blacked out and fell to the pavement, and the next thing I woke up, I was in a 9/11 ambulance and being deposited into the ER. So, and after that was a wonderful opportunity. If you don't have a spiritual teacher or spiritual philosophy to follow, all these things can be so tragic. So but having been with Paul Solomon, I recognized that when I was in the ER and in the hospital and so on, that okay, I'm 75, I'm entering into the last quarter of my life. I'm probably somewhere in this 75, 25 years left or so, maybe more. But it's a time to review, and I looked at it as an initiation experience that Paul always talked about, mystery school initiation. And I figured this is mine. I'm going to go through this experience as a mystery school experience. But before I do that, I jumped ahead a little bit. I wanted to acknowledge Bruce especially and all the people who have participated in stopping by, either taking me out to eat or bringing food back. If you're here, raise your hand or stand up and whatever. And when this happens consistently, you realize what the fellowship of inner light is. And that love that kind of binds us all at different levels. But Edgar Casey told us before anything can manifest physically, it has to begin spiritually. And the physical experience of having visitors come by every day and it connected me somehow to wonder what this really was all about and how are we linked and connected. And I think I was talking to Carol a couple of Sundays ago, and it's just a word she said or something, and I saw this golden cord above her head, but it linked to everyone in the room. And then in that split second I got it, that this is one way that love manifests, but it's love that connects us. And when there's an opportunity, love will manifest from spirit into the physical. We're not sure what form it'll take, but we learn to recognize it. In this case, it was pretty obvious how to recognize it. So again, thank you all. And my thanks especially to Bruce, who every week, is it every week or every month? He puts a schedule together, and those are the people who have volunteered to come. Then there's a calendar, and people come. And so that's wonderful. I want to acknowledge Bruce because he's such a special friend, and Marty, his beloved companion and wife. So I'm kind of a little bit at odd here. My introduction to the spiritual search began, I think, in 1960s or so, and I had the good fortune to meet my spiritual mother here. And many of you who know her was Gladys Davis Turner, who was Edgar Casey's secretary. She's responsible for that we have the Edgar Casey legacy, one of the main people. The other one, of course, was Hugh Lynn Casey, who made it his life purpose to make sure those readings in that organization was established and endured. Because there was a point after Edgar Casey's death that the readings themselves were in danger. Some of the members there were thinking of giving the readings to the Rosicrucians or some other group who had no real connection to Edgar Casey, so they probably would have got filed away and sat in file boxes. But Hugh Lynn and Gladys made it a point that those readings endured. And today we have the Association for Research and Enlightenment on the Hill, reaching millions of people. So, always special. But she was my spiritual mother. At least that's how I felt about her. And she always welcomed me into her home. And they lived across from Star of the Sea Catholic Church. And just one little story about that. Edgar Casey says, go back to your church. Don't leave your church once you get an awakening. So Gladys lived across from Star of the Sea, and I was born a Catholic. So I thought I'll go back to the Catholic Church. And I experienced this wonderful, wonderful young priest who could just, he was telling it like it is. You could feel people clenching their teeth. You could feel I was excited. This is it. This is a real thing. And thanking Casey for that key to, go back to your church. And so that went on. I think on the third Sunday, he wasn't there. The priest was gone. And where did he go? He went to get married. So that's kind of ended. I went to back to church, but it was dull and boring again, and nothing really was happening. But then that's when I listened to Al, Gladys's husband, and he talked about three things. If you were with him, he talked about three things only, three major topics. One was Edgar Casey, one was the Bible, and one was the Quakers. Now the Quakers, after the priest left, I didn't have a church to go to, so my heart opened and I started to hear Al talking about what the Quakers meant to him. So I went to Quaker meeting, and there I had this tremendous, wonderful experience. Now the Quakers, their form of worship is to sit in the silence. And if you're going to speak, you wait until Spirit gives you something to say. You don't go prearranged to ready to speak. You stand up, you say what Spirit gives you, and you sit down. And that experience at Quaker meeting, and there was a woman who was the founder of the meeting, was very active there, named Louise Wilson. And she would speak or stand up and say this gorgeous spiritual message that had come to her. And then she would sit down. And people were affected, touched, and so on. And I happened to be touched by at the first meeting I went to with her. So I felt like to get up and share what was coming through for me, to share with the congregation. And then, when it was all over and everybody was milling around, Louise came up to me and thanked me for the message. And this was astounding to me as a first-timer. And that continued a relationship with Louise for about 13 years. She would deliver the message, or I would get the message, but we would speak from the silence. And our messages more or less would complement each other or build on each other. And it was quite an experience. And I went to Quaker for 13 years. And then I got a kind of a restlessness, like the spirit of growth. You don't stand still for too long. And I was hearing about this place called the Fellowship of the Inner Light. And being raised Catholic, I started, I missed the music and I missed a lot of the features that the Catholicism presents in the Mass. And if there's something like that is going on at the Fellowship, not that they have big rituals and all that, but they have a lot of creative people go there. And some you heard today, Susan and Sandra and Sharon. Who's our singer here? Yeah, well, Charles was extraordinary, but he wasn't part of the Quaker meeting. And I meant to say that, Charles. That was a wonderful, wonderful presentation you did, both with your words and your music. But so I was getting curious about the fellowship, and I heard that people said I should introduce myself to Paul Solomon, because there's a couple who was the director here, and they had signed up to do a year's for their spiritual growth. They would take times from their busy careers and oversee the fellowship to ensure it works well. And they were getting ready to leave, and people were telling me, a couple of friends, to come and apply for the position. And I thought, well, I don't really know Paul. I haven't been there very long. I'm not married. They were looking for a couple, actually. And so there's many reasons I didn't think it would be productive to go. But finally I did feel that urging that I recognized from the Quaker meeting, when the Spirit's trying to get through, it's directing you to do something maybe you don't want to do or you don't feel prepared to do. So this meeting, I had a meeting scheduled with Paul. Now Paul was an overwhelming personality, if you didn't know him. I mean, overwhelming in the sense that this man carried energy with him. Not kind of hyper energy, but deep energy. So we sat down at the table, and I was thinking, well, I'll have to introduce myself and tell him my reasons I'm thinking. He'll tell me what he's looking for, and either I'm okay or I'm not okay for this position, and we'll work it out. So I sat at the table at the desk, and Paul looked at me, and I looked at him. There was a moment of quiet, and he said, "You want the position?" And I said, "Yeah." He said, "Okay, it's yours." So that was Paul. But when I had this experience, I think it was October, where I fell to the pavement walking my dog. 9/11 had to come and get me and take me to the ER, and I thought, well, this is the mystery school. Like I said, I'm sure I've lived out most of my life, and there's a lot yet probably still there, and this is going to be the perfect opportunity to bring it forth, one way or another. And so what I did was decide, if this is a mystery school tradition, I'm going to prepare myself. And one way is to surrender to the teachers. So I made my commitment that whatever food they served, whatever they wanted me to do at whatever hour of the day or night, I would surrender to it and go with it. And it's an amazing how many barriers and stuff we build in our mind that we can consider who we are. And the purpose of initiation, of course, was to break down those barriers, because the purpose of initiation is the mystery school is to have this experience where you're meeting God face to face, not wrapped up in your belief systems and explanations and rituals and things like that. And it's a process. It's a process. But when I started, the first time I accepted hospital food without a fuss, I felt like I had moved. I moved a degree toward that initiation. And anyway, I kept it up. It got deeper, it got more complex, it got harder. But I was consistent with it. And again, like I say, I was going through these different levels of belief that I accepted about myself. I would actually reach them, a fear would come up, and no, plunge through it. And then you're at another level, and another level. So it was quite exciting experience, actually, but a difficult one. And finally, after a month or two or three, whatever it was, going through this process, I did have a genuine experience of initiation. I reached that point where I had changed something deep in myself. It wasn't mental or physical. I don't know, I guess we would call it spiritual or whatever, but something, it was a physical depth that was changed in me. And what it gave me was a sense of self-confidence and personal power. Whereas before, I've always been kind of a passive person. I like to be quiet. I like to absorb things rather than be out in front leading the charge kind of person. And I'm still basically that person. But what's interesting, without a lot of change, you know yourself to be a different person, and you responded differently to various situations, speak out more, take just so many different ways. Hard to kind of put it into words, but I see from many of your knowing looks that you've been something through that. To me, the experience, the degree of depth is what marked the experience. And I know what those people were doing when they set up these ancient initiation ceremonies. You had to become a new person. You couldn't remain the same and be accepted into this spiritual community or whatever it was you were initiating for. There had to be change, and the deeper, the more profound, the more you understood that you are a new being in Christ, we would say today. And all the religions, I believe, kind of teach that. Basically, the teachings of surrender and recognition and of dedicating your life to sharing the message or sharing your life through service with others to hopefully be a channel who heals, inspires, forgives, blesses, is patient. All the things that Casey said were fruits of the Spirit, the spiritual growth. More peace, more patience, more love, more kindness, more generosity, etc. And when I was in the facility, I was doing quite well with this, even on all levels. But when I got home, I got discharged, and I was looking forward. I'm in the clear now. The hardest part for me was being home. I live alone in an attached apartment, and the owners of the home are good friends of mine. I've known them for years and years. But there was a door that separated the apartment from the house. Not a locked door, it was easy access into the family kitchen. But most of the time I was alone. For the visitors who would come by, that was a wonderful time. But then they have to leave, they've got things to do. And I was back being alone, just with my beautiful lady friend, who many of you have met. She has 4 feet. But she is unconditional love. And sometimes just having her was enough to get you out of the feeling of being alone and isolated and so on. But the feeling of being alone and isolated, abandoned, forgotten, life is going on around you, for you it's standing still. The only way to get through that is to, again, you got to go down to that deep place and know this is only of the mind. And a good part of our own world is an illusion, because we create our world through our mind, not our soul, our spirit. We have a new world if we live through spirit, but it's spirit that is untouched by ego. There's a lot of spiritual talk and action, and people can get that kind of hallelujah experience and think they've been saved, but they haven't been changed. So that was another big test was living alone in the apartment with just the dog. Of course, Larry came over many times, tried to get the computer to work, and things like that. So there's a sense of being cut off from the world, and a sense of, oh, so this is what it's like when you're in the penitentiary. Or so this is what it was like for Napoleon when he was on the island of Elba by himself. Or any time where you're just in an extreme situation, cut off from the rest of the world. And which makes it such an effective tool for correction, is you have so much time to think and meditate. Now, I don't know what Napoleon did with his time, but I don't think it stopped him from wanting to conquer the world, but he had the opportunity was presented to him. And we did have on one of the bulletins a couple of weeks back, a reading from Paul, which said, more or less, learn to recognize the opportunities that are presented to you day by day. That's a big thing. That this is an opportunity for you to do what you say you want, which is we want that deeper consciousness. We want to be changed. We want to be more loving, more peaceful, more giving, more creative. Well, then things happen that ignite that are the weak spots in us. And we have to learn, if we can recognize this is an opportunity for me to express patience rather than criticism or things like that. You've all probably worked with that kind of material, but it was nicely said in the reading. To learn how to recognize the opportunities that are presented to you. If the opportunities go by and we're still hanging on to, why did she say that? How could they do that to me? Or so on and so on. It's just another opportunity to let go of that stuff that holds us back. There's no growth in those kind of statements. You stay right where you are. In fact, you get a little more entrenched in it, which makes it more of a challenge to let it dissolve and just free yourself. It's wonderful. I had a feeling when I was thinking about this, giving this talk, and I was so not even close to being able to stand up or for long or so on, but it was in my mind. I wanted, remembering my Quaker days and having this energy flow and have it touch the congregation. That's what I want. I want to go back and address the congregation here, the fellowship, the village, and have it express it in such a way that people can feel the Spirit in themselves, gets quickened, not so much by what I say, but that I am the channel. And right now I feel pretty kind of weak and humble. I say, you're not the powerful speaker you think you are. You can hardly get the words out. So how's Spirit going to use you to get what you prayed for all those weeks and months? This opportunity to be a channel, like in the Quaker days, that people could feel and touch and so on, in themselves, not by anything I said or did, but because you were ready to hear it, whatever it is you heard. And so here we are. And I was thinking of the loneliness of the long-distance runner. You ever hear that book? Well, the words kept coming up to me in these latter days about the loneliness of the long-distance runner. And to me, that I'm here now standing at this podium from where I begun when the ER came and picked me up off the street to take me. That was a long run. It's a long run, and if you're a long distance runner, you have to have stamina and persistence, and you don't give up. And and that's another image that came to me was persevere, keep up, don't let circumstances deter you. And to he who endures to the end, they climb the sacred mountain. They get to the top of the mountain, and they can see. So that's what I think. I endured. I had this, can't think of the right word, but I want to say, but it positioned set my energy in a certain direction. And I can't say that I had that totally before. I knew I liked to write and do things like that. But I didn't have an overall sense of I'm going in this direction and I'm going to get there. One way or another, I'm going to get there. And in that process comes the change. For me, the strength of purpose and the way of knowing yourself as a new being, although sometimes that old being is still there. It's not entirely gone, because that's a process too, and it takes how many cycles to go through that? How many lifetimes? Ravi Shankar said it took 13 lifetimes to master what was it he played? The sitar, yeah. And so there are times that I feel the heaviness of my physical body on my spirit and on my intentions to stay positive. It's like this heaviness. And that's the thing I know I have to dissolve. And just that spirit, if I hold that intention of being free and light, that heaviness of the physical, of this living in the world of gravity and heavy materialized energies that we all move through. We all move through that to, ascend or climb or reach or evolve up to the world of light, where all is light. It's a thrilling kind of thought that it's within us to do that, each and every one of us, if that's our intention. And what I want to close with is something that's been good for me, and that's a meditation. We'll have a short meditation. And this is a particular kind of meditation that evolved for me in laying in that bed in those months and working with this, is Casey says, know your spiritual ideal. So each of us has an ideal. That ideal can be unconditional love, or it can be peace, patience, something that the Christ in you is moving you in that direction to obtain. So the first thing is to know your ideal. Because you set that ideal and you think of it, and the third eye point between the eyes and the forehead. When you're thinking, that's where you want to have that ideal right there. Thinking of it, just in thought, that's enough. Then the next thing is to know to breathe. Consciously breathe from the heart. So you're holding the ideal at the third eye point of the forehead, and you begin to breathe. And breathe in, breathe out, holding that ideal steady. And breath is an aspect of God. In fact, it could be God, for all we know. Our breath keeps us alive, and it's full of science. Neil was here a couple of weeks ago talking about how the molecules and all those parts of our body, there's one set of molecules in our body that they love to dance. They're dancing all the time. But when we look at them, they stop. So the idea is to keep the flow going while you're holding your ideal, because you're feeling the living God. It's not a concept, but you feel it in and through your body. At the same time, you're charging up your personal spiritual ideal. So let's just try it for about 3 or 4 minutes and see what happens, okay? So let's begin with just the ideal in your consciousness of this is what I want to be. This is what I want to become. This is what I'm moving toward in my spiritual life. To be perfect peace. To be patient. To be kind and forgiving. Any of those that speak to you. And then you begin to breathe with that ideal held in your consciousness. And then you can feel the power and presence of your breath energizing your body, your mind, with that hope, not hope, that's kind of a weak word, that knowing that this is possible. I can be more kind, especially when these situations come up that test me in my weak spots. That there is where I can breathe strength in, because I carry the ideal. And I feel the living God, the God that lives inside me, that comes through my breath into me, the same breath that we're all breathing. There is one God, one field of breath, and that God field gives us life. So what do? We hold the ideal to honor that life by becoming it, expressing it. And then to be grateful, have gratitude for whatever happens to you. Happens because you've drawn it to you by something unconscious, a pattern. I'm just speaking of the challenging things. The good things that lift us up and heal, they just come straight from God. But we got to work through the things we've created that are those interferences to that full flow of divine light and love. So we're always grateful for whatever life has presented to us in whatever form it has come. Feel the spirit moving, each in our own way. Spirit. This is a little verse that I came up with in one of these days in bed when I woke up not feeling so inspired, that darkness. And I said, I don't want to spend the day with thoughts like this. I got to change them, and you can't just will them away. You got to kind of work with them. And I got to a set of words came to me that I had to work with to get it right, but it goes like this. Actually, it's a little verse of a song. God is my creator, and always shall it be. God is not a person, but is the source of me. That's the song. So far we get. Okay? Time to stop.